bring comfort to some investors. But I think Rob's right a lot. We'll probably tune in hoping she'll say something, but I think the focus will be on the budget and preparing us for a bad news budget.
All right. Up next, so one more topic, that is on the trade front with the required joint CUSMA review coming in July. The Prime Minister has announced he's tapped longtime senior public servant Janice Charette to be Canada's next chief trade negotiator.
And implement. This is exactly what we need.
Charette will work closely with Mark Canada's new ambassador to the U.S. The announcement comes as hundreds of Canadian delegates take part in the biggest trade mission to Mexico in decades, led by Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc. Mark, where the appointment of Charette is kind of weight is going to rest on her shoulders as chief negotiator with that CUSMA review coming up in July. That's all of 5 months away.
I'm sure it's going to feel like the weight of the world on her, but she experience to tackle this matter, and I've yet negative comment, but by and large, there's a whole bunch of positive comments from all political areas about how confident she is. So it looks like a good one, but it's no small task that she's going to be.
For Charette to learn from what Chrystia Freeland experienced.
Recognition that things have changed. So even if you've got could play a key role in that. Front and center.
This isn't a first contact with Mexico. We've been working with them over time. And I know in the case of Alberta, Mexico sits on some huge, rich assets of energy, but they don't have the technology or the know-how to extract them, efficiently. And so it's good news that they're going, I think, for our energy industry and the people who support it. So I think we'll see some deals done.
All right, folks, I think we'll have to leave it there for time. Good to see you both. Thank you kindly for this.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks.
Now, here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News, and it's about the Canadian delegation now in Mexico, hoping to forge a new trade relationship. Impact says, I'm all for it if it helps Canadians and Mexicans. At the same time, I believe Mexico is wanting to share the same values that we do as Canucks. Jim writes, how many times is Carney going to try and get a deal with Mexico? When will he learn from experience? Corky thinks, irrelevant without the United States. How can you not talk to your largest trading partner? Myron writes, any trade deals that Mexico makes will have to go to Trump. Trump will lose his mind and tariff Mexico and Canada. Alan says, we need to stop asking ourselves, what will Washington think of this? Every time we take actions that benefit Canadians. Have your say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. Coming up tomorrow with the start of spring than a week away, and the provincial budget. House Leader Christina Gray, that is